Things were pretty quiet in Skaugnir the other day, so most of the fellas in town decided to head on down to the fjord to do some fishing. Now, as every fisherman knows, every fisherman has his own special, secret, sacred place. It is his and his alone, that he would never share with anyone else under threat of torture or death. The sun is always shining, the fish are always biting, and the fish are the size of horses. This special, secret, sacred place is handed down from generation to generation, from father to son, or daughter if she be so inclined. And so on this glorious sunny day, we find nearly the entire male population of Skaugnir all standing within about 15 feet of each other along the bank down near the boat dock, shoulder to shoulder, baiting their hooks and casting their lines, and not paying the slightest bit of attention to the fellow standing on either side of him, because, of course, there is nobody standing on either side of him. Even then old Hakon managed to snag Viglap behind the ear with his hook and nearly tossed him out into the middle of the fjord. As you can imagine, with all this going on, nobody was catching much of anything. But then, catching never really is the point, is it? After all, if the whole point was to catch something, it would be called catching, and now fishing, wouldn't it? And while fish are not the smartest of God's creatures, the fish of Skaugnir seem to have learned to avoid that particular section of the fjord. In fact, folks still talk about the last fella that actually catch a fish by hook and line down there. Old Eric Longtoes, Hildy's grandfather, did it about 3 years before he met Hildy's grandmother while on Viking in Ireland. To this day, every fella in Skaugnir can recite the Eric saga word for word, from the moment that silly fish got itself all wrapped up in Eric's fishing line, to the point when Eric fell off the bank and into the fjord, to the end when he finally managed to tackle it in the shallows, drag it up onto the bank, and stomp it to death. The jaw of that fish still hangs over the wall over at Bjarki and Hildy's long hall, right above the fireplace. And the Eric saga is recited every year on his birthday. Now, while most of the fellas in town are standing shoulder to shoulder, jostling around, old Snaevar Spear Lucky had his own special, secret, sacred place. You see, he learned that if he just walked around the end of the fjord to the other side, that he has the whole bank to himself. You see, Snaevar has a theory that the reason no one has caught any fish for so long is that all of the other fellas are casting their lines right out into the middle of the fjord, and the fish just swim around them on either side. So normally he just drops his line right down next to the bank, figuring that some fish will run into it while it's avoiding all of the others. On this particular morning, he was feeling just a bit more enthusiastic and cast it out just a little farther than he normally does. Then he hooked his pole up under his arm, laid back, and went to sleep. All the other fellas on the other side of the fjord did the same thing, casting their lines out there, hooking their poles up under their arms, jostling each other as they settled on down and went to sleep. About an hour or so, all of the various lines and hooks drifted around in the current, crossing and recrossing each other. Snaevar's line drifted out just like all the rest, but it was still far enough away that it missed all of the others. At least up until a small piece of driftwood ran into his line and pulled it right out into the middle of the snarl just with everybody else's. While no one in town had ever caught a fish by hook and line since Eric's time, Snaevar didn't need anyone to tell him that if your line goes tight and your pole goes down, that there is probably something on the other end of it. And with the thought of being the first fella since Eric to actually catch something, it got his blood a-pumping and a-pounding, and he jumped up with a tremendous battle cry and gave an almighty heroic yank on that pole, snagging all of the other hooks and lines as he did so. Now, when Snaevar let out his yell and jumped to his feet, he caught most of the other fellas by surprise. But one at a time, a tug on their poles got their attention, and each one of them started yanking and a-pulling, screaming and a-shouting, sure that each one of them was going to land that fish that would make them immortal in song and story. And old Snaevar thought he had caught himself a whale. One second he is pulled right on down to the water and he fights his way back up. And then somebody else gives a yank and he gets pulled down one side of the bank and on up the other side of the bank. And then he gets pulled right back down to the water again. Then he fights his way back and forth as each of these fellows across the fjord took his turn trying to land that legendary fish. But finally there came a point when several of the fellas gave a yank all at the same time, and that was just too much for old Snaevar to handle. And he went flying right off the bank into the air and into the fjord. Now, he could have just let go of that pole at that point, but the image in his mind of the Skald standing up in front of the whole village, or at the local thing, reciting the Snaevar saga was just too much for him to let go. So he stubbornly clung to that pole, even while he was being dragged through the water and up over the rocky bottom of the fjord, swinging back and forth like a fish himself. As each of the other fellows took their turns yanking and pulling, trying to land that legendary fish, all with the same vision of their own personal saga being recited in their minds. Then once again, several of the fellas all gave a mighty yank, and poor old Snaevar sailed right up out of the fjord and landed on the bank in front of them with a soggy splat. Now I was home in Skaugnir that day, when all this was going on, sitting right up on top of the hill watching the whole show. And while they may not have caught the fish, they did manage to succeed in getting immortalized in a story, where the moral is, be careful what you fish for, be careful what you fish for, and be careful where you do it. Yeah, sure, you betcha.